Okay, are we all in agreement? It's 3 o'clock. It is on my watch. Okay, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Welcome, councillors. It is Tuesday, the 12th of July, 3 o'clock. This is the committee of the whole for the town of Gibson, being held electronically on the traditional territory of the Sechelt Nation.
Squamish.
Sorry, Squamish Nation. Yes, we're there. And I have been informed that Councillor Ladwig may be late, and I'm not sure, have not heard from Councillor Lumley will be late. I've not heard from Councillor Ladwig yet, so then we'll see. But we will proceed with the meeting and call it to order at 3 o'clock. And oh, there's Councillor Ladwig. She's coming. Yeah. There, welcome. Yes. So we'll proceed and call the meeting to order and ask firstly for approval of the agenda. Councillor Kroll, thank you. Councillor Ladwig, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. Anybody opposed? Nobody opposed. Councillor Kroll, I assume, is in favor since he moved it. We have several reports, and first off, I'd like a resolution council to receive all the reports. Councillor D'Andrade, Councillor Ladwig, all in favor of receipt? Thank you very much. And our first one, we have Sergeant Jennifer Prunty of the RCMP, and these are for the Q1 statistics for the town of Gibsons. And are you present?
Mayor Beamish, Sergeant Prunty hasn't logged in yet, so may I suggest we go to the second item on the agenda until she arrives?
Okay, we can do that. So we'll go then to Chief Michael, and we'll defer Sergeant Prunty until she's with us. And we'll go to Chief Michael for item 3.2, and this is the Gibsons and District Volunteer Fire Department Q2 report. Chief Michaels, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We haven't had you yet.
So Travis Young has been off full-time position of fire inspector effective May 29th. Travis started as a volunteer with the fire department inspector in 2020. He has a really keen interest in fire inspections and investigations and is certified as a hazardous material response technician. We value Travis's enthusiasm and look forward to working with Travis in his role. The fire department currently has a total of 38 members. The department conducted a review of members on extended leave, resulting in 5 members leaving the department. The department nearly lost another member. However, she was able to secure local accommodations before having to move elsewhere. The focus on training for this quarter was wildfire preparedness, hazardous materials response, live fire service training. The fire department was also able to host courses this quarter, including a wildfire scenario with multiple departments from the Sunshine Coast participating and special guests from the District of North Vancouver, a hazardous materials response operations course, an emergency scene traffic control instructor course, and an infant car seat installation course. The fire department responded to 89 calls for service in the second quarter, including several vehicle fires, 2 motor vehicle incidents over embankments, a child in distress in a locked vehicle, and a mutual aid call for our Quint to assist Sechelt Fire with the structure. The prevention team completed 43 fire and life safety inspections, 29 referrals, and conducted 4 fire investigations, all real fires. 2 of the vehicle fires were determined to be deliberately set, with the other 2 being determined to be mechanical issues. The fire department participated in a fire prevention presentation at one of the local elementary schools as part of the firefighter training program, and also hosted a local fire hall tour. The health and dental benefit plan for volunteers has begun to roll out, and most members have now been enrolled. The department is actively prioritizing current projects with recent supply chain and climate is otherwise making good progress, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chief, thank you very much for your report. As usual, very thorough for us. I'm concerned about the vehicle fires because I understand the one down by Gibsons Creek was kind of set while people were out walking their dog. Any background on that one?
I don't want to speak out of turn because I do have the RCMP on this meeting as well, but we'll call this one a case of mistaken identity.
Ah, okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So I can park my car relatively safely unless I was the one they were looking for.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Councilors, any questions? Councilor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish, and thank you, Rob, for your report. Just a query with, you've lost 5 staff. You did reference the one person left because of the housing issue. Was that the only one who's experienced that difficulty, or is this something that you're finding making it difficult for recruitment and retaining staff?
It's not the first. It's the first, it's the most recent one. We are finding that to begin to pose a more significant challenge to the fire department. As part of that, as I said, we did a review of members who were on extended leave. A lot of them work related, family related, things like that. But now we find ourselves in a position where we'll need to do a recruitment drive, and we're keenly watching what that'll look like with the new climate and with housing availability and things like that. So we're hopeful it's not a major problem, but it's creeping up a little bit more than it used to.
Councilor Ladwick.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I just wanted to say that I, as always, appreciate your updates. One of the things I really like about them is that not only do you update us on the recent fires that have been taking place, but that you're also updating us on the HR issues and on your real property or assets. And so I found this one really interesting to get an overview of your vehicles, for example, which was news to me. So like I just think it's really helpful for us to get the full picture of your department. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ladwick. Councilor Kroll.
One more question, if I may. Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I noticed your ladder truck is sitting in a repair depot. Is what's going on there, if I might inquire?
Well, I'm happy to assure the council here that our ladder truck is in full repair. The ladder truck that you see parked down the road is belonging to House on Pulp and Paper, and I believe they're having some significant challenges and extensive repairs are required on their apparatus.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's seeing no more questions, Chief. Thank you very much for your report, and we hope you have a very safe and summer that's kind of low in fire calls. Fortunately, we've been fortunate with the weather so far. It has not been a lot of outside fires yet, but we just never know. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank
Thank
you.
And I see the RCMP have joined us. We'll welcome you, Sergeant Pruddy, and to the meeting. We'll go back. We skipped over your agenda item, so we do have your statistics for the Q1, and just invite you to present them and present any information you'd like to do.
Great, thank you, Mayor Beamish, and apologies for our delay in getting here. We just had a couple technical issues getting hooked up, but we're here. Just by way of introduction, this is my second week here, and I'm the acting detachment commander. My permanent role is going to be as the ops NCO here at the Sunshine Coast Detachment. So I anticipate that I'll be in this role until around Christmas time when the new detachment commander will be named. So for any questions or oversight related issues, I'm your point of contact here and for the foreseeable future.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it, and appreciate being invited to the meeting today. So you have before you the Q1 stats. This time, as a result of feedback received by Staff Sergeant Gay, we have broken those stats down into Gibson specific stats. So that's what you'll see on the sort of second, I don't know what pages they'll show in your addendum, but the multicolored pages at the end of the Sunshine Coast reporting. So if anyone's not able to see it, if you could just let me know. But what I'll do is I'll start by going through the second page, which summarizes the overall offense numbers. So when we look at violent crime offenses, we see for our 2022 Q1 stats, 25 reported crimes, which is up from 22 in 2021 and down from 2020, which was 26. Property crime related offenses, we're up from 2021 at 77 for 2022, which is still down from where we were at in 2020. If we break those down on page 1, you can see that the violent crime related offenses include primarily assaults. There were 4 sex-related offenses. The domestic violence flag, those are not new over and above the assaults or sex offenses. They're just when a violent person's offense is committed that has a domestic or intimate partner violence flag attached to it. Moving on to property crime, the total numbers for all of the property crime is 77 again, and that's for Q1 of 2022. And that is up from 2021, which was 59. We do see an increase in break and enters from 2021 to 2022, as well as shoplifting. Those seem to be sort of the biggest upticks in the property offense related categories. Traffic offenses for motor vehicle incidents, we're at 15 for Q1 of 2022. That is up from 9 in 2021. It's also up from 2020. That includes collisions as well as impaired driving. I do think it's notable that impaired driving is up considerably. So that is from 5 to 12, and that is up again from 2020 where we were at 2. So those are the, that's sort of a brief overview, and I would be welcome to any questions, concerns, or issues that you'd like to discuss out of that.
Thank you very much. And I agree, it's a much more comprehensive summary of the statistical information available to us. It does require some explanation or some interpretation, so I appreciate that. And I'm sure council may have some questions. I'll go to council first. Councilor Ledwig.
Yeah, thank you very much for this report. It is very good and helpful for us to see. I was just wondering, statistically, is the columns 2020 and 2021 the full year data, and then 2022 is just Q1? Or is this all is 2020 and 2021 and 2022 Q1 data? Do you understand what I mean? Because then that would
I wondered the same thing myself. That is Q1 from each of the years.
Okay, great. And then I just have one other comment. This is great. Thank you so much. I would like it if as time goes on, we extend the timeline and not just keep it a rolling 3 years. So it'd be nice to see this trend over time. So next year, for example, just keep adding a column. It'll be 2023, 2024, but it'd be nice to see what this trend does over time. So that's my one comment, but thank you very much. This is good to know.
You're welcome. If you did want to break that down, just incidentally, on the other package of information, so this is the Sunshine Coast as a whole package, it is broken down more. We've got 2017, 2018, 2019, but that's more workload summary analysis. So that's not it's nowhere near the detail that you're seeing in the Gibson specific report that you have for this quarter. But it gives you an idea if you look at page 9 in your agenda.
Okay, thank you. I'll have another look at that.
Okay.
Sergeant, on the workload summary, Sunshine Coast Provincial RCMP, so the police strength they're referring to are the provincial constables, not the members who are with the seashell detachment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I suppose so. One of the things that is going to show over time, and it shows actually a little bit here already, is that 2020 and 2021 were some kinds of offenses a bit of anomalous years. Shoplifting, for example, and Councillor Kroll and I were discussing this the other day. And in 2019, there was shoplifting was significant statistics. In 2020 and 2021, because there was much more managing access to commercial buildings in terms of, and I take, for example, the Mark store in Gibsons here, where they had the access onto the mall as well as the front door. In 2020 and 2021, the mall access was mostly closed. And so people trying on shoes and running didn't have the same opportunity. So over time, we'll see those sort out, and probably more comparable statistics for some kinds of offenses are 2022 with 2019, as opposed to with 2020 and 2021. So, and we'll see it'll sort itself out over time, because now we're back to one say is almost normal in terms of a shopping experience, and so almost normal in terms of a shoplifting experience as well. And there probably are other crimes that could be attributed similarly from either businesses being closed during those periods of time, or workers, people being at home more during those periods of time. So we'll see what happens with that. So it is interesting, and that's why over time, provided they don't change how they report, which often happens in statistical situations, the data collection and the reporting changes, and we all start all over again with a new sheet. So, Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I just wanted to thank you for the report. I sat in on the meeting when the figures were presented to the regional district and the district of Sechelt. So I really appreciate the depth you've taken the reporting to, and I appreciate, that not always do you get the figures in the simplest way for you to report them. So I really appreciate the time and effort that's gone into this. So thank you.
Councillor Ludwig.
Sorry, just one last comment. So I must have missed that one table, because it's the one that you referred me to, because it's the Sechelt Municipal RCMP workload summary. And so I must have just skimmed it because I was looking for Gibsons, so I apologize. But wow, your members workload is looking like it's doubling by member. Am I reading that correctly? Like some of these total calls for service per member, maybe not doubling, but it's going up significantly. How are you guys doing over there?
We had that question from District of Sechelt as well. And the way it can be explained is that you'll see that in comparison with the provincial averages, the provincial Sunshine Coast provincial bodies, their calls for service and case per member are lower than the provincial average. And the Sechelt municipal members, theirs are slightly higher than the provincial average. The reality is that when a member reports for duty at the Sunshine Coast Detachment, their job for the day won't be confined to a certain area. So they're responding to calls within all of our service areas. So the workload is equally distributed that way. We can also say that some of those provincial positions would be management type positions like myself and Corporal Atui. So that sort of, I don't find it the most accurate reflection of the workload per se, unless you combine the two together, in which case we're falling into a fairly average range for the province.
Is there a certain number of calls, for example, that is considered a sustainable workload for members? Like at what point does it start to become a flag for overwork and burnout and that kind of thing? Or is that being tracked by the RCMP?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it is done by individual managers within the detachment. So their watch commanders and the ops NCO are watching to make sure that the workload remains equally distributed. But in terms of a specific number, I wouldn't have that for you because it depends on the files that they're investigating. Some
Right.
files may remain active, but they're not, they don't require a lot of time and energy. So, you know, an assault causing bodily harm where you're retrieving video surveillance and doing neighborhood canvasses, that sort of a file, and you don't have a person in custody, that sort of a file can be drawn out for a long period of time and does require quite a bit of effort and work. Whereas a shoplifting offense, the person could be arrested that day, the report to Crown Counsel written the same shift, and that's the end of the file for the member. It goes off to Crown Counsel. So it's really hard to weigh a specific number for you know, when is too much for the members, but it is something that we gauge and we're very much in tune with at the detachment because member wellness is a priority for us here. And this detachment seems to have been doing a really good job of that prior to my arrival.
Great summary. Thank you. That was helpful.
Sergeant, in terms of the allocation, like you've got 22 provincial members allocated, how many in fact are available to you and on the street at any one time?
For roadable resources, we have 2 vacant positions right now. So the Staff Sergeant Detachment Commander is one, and that is a job action that's underway for staffing. It hasn't been posted yet, but again, we anticipate it being filled by Christmas time-ish. And then there's the second position, which was a newly created crime prevention position. That's a constable position. That staffing action is underway as well, and we're in the queue. What will likely happen is we'll receive a recruit, and that recruit will go to a watch, and we will run an internal competition for the position of the crime prevention person here.
Thank you. As you know, we have a police advisory committee here in Gibsons, and we're advertising right now for another volunteer member to be part of that committee. Once the committee is up to its full membership, I'd really appreciate the opportunity for you to meet with them and just talk about policing and what how your role and their role can relate in the community. I appreciate
that opportunity for sure.
We'll be in touch. But thank you, Councilor. Is there any other Councilor Dindrat? You got any hand up?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the report. I was wondering, the statistics overall show increase of almost everything. So does the local RCMP engage in kind of analysis of the reasons why? And obviously we can suspect, but I'm wondering if there is an analysis and then there's a kind of a meta-analysis with other towns similar size that is done as well as the provincial level or things like that.
That's a good question. Within the detachment, and just to be frank, I haven't been here long enough to really get a grasp on that. But what I have seen is that information that we're looking for isn't going to be something that's found in a vacuum from the police side of the house. It's going to be an integrated approach with community service providers. So my interest is in sitting with the committees that already exist, including supportive housing, Rain City, probation, to discuss we'll call them people who continue to offend and require extra wraparound services. The ultimate goal here from the policing side of things would be to reduce the rate of recidivism. So we don't see the same people coming up constantly before the courts, and they're dealt with more of an integrated community approach. So that is, it doesn't really answer your question, but it is what I'm interested in drilling down on. And it's what I notice being in the community for the past 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll look forward to, again, hopefully a quiet summer. The population always balloons this time of year with tourism and traffic. And so we'll hopefully you guys have a quiet and safe summer. And thank you very much. Thank you for really responding to us in our request for better information. That's very helpful for us, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Credit to that goes to Staff Sergeant Gay. He really did listen to what you said and the feedback from UBCM. So appreciate it.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Okay, council, we'll go on to item 3.3 on our agenda, which is the Director of Finance. And this is 2020-2023 permissive property tax exemptions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report relates to bylaw 1273, which was passed in 2019, and it authorizes permissive property tax exemptions for 15 properties. And this covers 4 years, 2020 through 2023 taxation years. And as you're familiar with, when we have multi-year exemptions granted, staff annually confirm with the property owners that the use remains the same as when they submitted their original application. And this annual review also provides an opportunity for owners to make requests for additional exemptions. And so the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the confirmations of use for the existing properties receiving the permissive tax, and also get direction on a new application submitted by the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society. And I want to mention that we do have 2 representatives from the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society in the meeting, Chris Newmeyer as well as Kim Darwin. So they're available for questions that the community may have.
Thank you.
So on page 2 of my report, you can see the existing approvals. The results that all the ownership remains consistent with the original applications. There's no change there, which is great news. As mentioned, we do have a new application this year from the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society, and this is specific to the property located at 744-746 Franklin Road. And this is the parcel of land that's owned by the town of Gibsons, but it's been provided to the society under a 99-year lease agreement. And that was for the purpose of providing affordable housing. And so the property now contains 3 rental units, 2 non-market and 1 market. And so 2021 was the first year that this property was taxed under the lease agreement. And the society have paid taxes for the 2021 taxation year, as well as this current 2022 taxation year. And so they're submitting a request for permissive tax exemptions in 2023, which would be the first year that you'd be able to authorize this under the rules of permissive tax exemption. And so I've attached their application for your review to determine what permissive property tax exemption level should be provided. And just a reminder, permissive property tax exemptions, they are specific to the assessment-based portion of the property taxes only. It doesn't extend to the parcel taxes. And so any property that has a permissive tax exemption is still required to pay parcel taxes, which this year is just over $815. The exemption also does not extend to any utility user fees as well. And so regarding level of exemption, so I've included the policy for you as well, so you can reference that. Regarding the level of exemptions, as you're aware, there's a variety of what level you could exemption you can provide. And so I gave 3 scenarios, and the versions provided all keep the existing permissively get their properties at the same level, but I'm providing you with some options for the Franklin Road property, just to give you a sense of what that might look like. And just a reminder, if the committee wants to provide only a partial permissive exemption, it has to be specified in either physical terms like square footage or a percentage of overall space of the land and improvements. So version 1 in my report that reflects status quo, that's no exemption, taxes fully paid by the society, and that's the current state of the property. Version 2 reflects an exemption for part of it, and this would be the non-market based portion only, and that's a 67% exemption, and that reflects the 2 affordable / non-market housing units while continuing to tax the market rental unit. And version 3 reflects a 100% exemption, and that would be an exemption for the entire property, all the units that are there. And so there is the policy that's attached for your reference. And although it's not specifically reflected in the policy at this point, you can consider overall exemptions granted as a percentage of the annual tax levy. So I added that in this year to the spreadsheet just to give you a sense of where That is, so current exemptions without the addition of this new application total 2% of taxes collected, and that's specific to the town of Gibsons portion only. And a reminder that any exemption extends to all agency taxation. Another thing that you can consider when reviewing this application is any further requests the town might receive for similar developments, either by the society or other societies in town, and also other support that is provided to the applicant, such as cash or in-kind contributions. In this case, that would be cash contributions and the long-term lease on the property. And so from a logistics point of view, if there's no permissive tax granted for this property, then there's no bylaw change required. The bylaw stays status quo. If the committee recommends and then goes through the council approval, full or partial, then staff would bring a revised bylaw amendment back to council in September for approval. And so for this one, the permissives, we've been following a pattern of a practice of having a 4-year term for the permissive exemption, and that matches council's term. And so for this year, the decision is specific to 2023 only. The next full intake of applications will occur this time next year, June of next year, and that matches the new council's term in office. They will have a look at all the properties at that time, review under policy, and make a decision. And I would recommend at that time that it's also for 4 years. That way you're not having to do this process every year, because as you can see, use doesn't change generally for these kind of properties. From a communications point of view, I was looking ahead, and from a timing point of view, if council wants to approve an exemption, looking at the readings of the bylaw, I would propose to bring the first reading back to council on September 6th, and then second and third in late September, and then have it adopted on October the 4th. And that's prior to the upcoming election, just so it's not straddling that date. And again, this is specific to 2023 taxation, and this bylaw has to be adopted prior to October 31st. And that's part of that's as per the legislation. It's very prescriptive at that point. And so recommendations on page 6 of my report, I provided a couple of recommendations with alternative wording for you. The first one, option 1, is status quo, and that is that no permissive exemption be granted. Option 2 is wording that you could use for a full or a partial exemption. And my recommendation is that given the significant support, that the status quo be maintained and there be no exemption. However, council, of course, is at your purview to provide either partial, and that can be at any percentage, or a full exemption. And so
Can you take the iPad?
the wording of the recommendations is provided. So, and that is my report. And I mentioned the 2 representatives are actually now in the meeting, and they can answer any questions that you may have. So as can I. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. And before we go, I would like to invite Chris and Kim to join us. And welcome, Councillor Lumley. You announced your presence, and good to hear you. Yeah. And Chris, welcome, and Kim, I see you're there as well. And Director of Finance, first, before we hear them, a question I have for you on the table on page 2 of your report, 36 of our agenda. We have reference to the Good Samaritan and the Kiwanis Village. Can you tell me, are those 100% exemptions, or are they partial exemptions?
The Good Samaritan, they have a 75% exemption. And the Kiwanis Village, that is the one, they have a few properties up at Kiwanis Way there. And that one is a combination of, so that's the one at 840 Kiwanis Way, and that's the Sunshine Coast Kiwanis Village. They are partially statutorily exempt, so that's at a provincial level. So that's already exempt before it even gets to council's purview. And then the remainder is permissive exemption. So they're 100%, but part of it's statutory and part of it's permissive, where Good Samaritan is 75% permissive and the remaining 25% is taxable.
Okay. And supportive housing, where do they fall?
Board of Housing is very interesting. They are exempt, but it's because their assessment comes in at $1. So they, from an assessment point of view, they're exempt at an assessment level because they're class 3. They have an assessment automatically of $1. So there's no taxes. I mean, the taxes on $1 are minimal, so that's why they're exempt. But they don't have to go through either a statutory or a permissive process because of the exemption or the assessment exemption that they get under legislation.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful information. Chris and Kim, thank you. Welcome. And thank you for what you're doing with our community as well and for the Sunshine Coast. I would like to hear from you on this. One thing I was interested in, because I don't see it in any of the reporting, either on the annual budget reports or the engagement report that's from the accountant, is the actual rents that you're charging for the 3 units on Franklin Road. Are you able to share that?
Yep, we can share that. So we have 2 that are deemed affordable. One is a 3-bedroom. I don't have the exact number, but it's around $14.50. Kim, I might be wrong on that. I think there's about, I might be off $10 or $15 here and there when I give these numbers. So that's 3 bedrooms, $14.50. And then we have a bachelor studio above it for $9.50. It's a rather large studio. And then the 2-bedroom, which is considered market rent, it was, at least it was at the time when we constructed it, housing has changed significantly on the Sunshine Coast, is also $14.75, I believe. And that is the market rent unit.
Okay, so the 3-bedroom and the bachelor are at an affordable rate and looked at it in that view. So thank you.
Yeah, we're allowed to charge whatever we'd like for the market rental one, but we've tried to keep it as affordable as possible by keeping the costs low on the project, which is why the rent's probably lower than you'd see in Gibsons.
And just for our information, they're fully occupied now and all good.
Fully occupied, 4 children running around those yards a lot. I'm doing a lot of yard work down there, but yeah, fully occupied since day one.
Excellent, thank you. Now, what can you tell us, or do you want to tell us in respect to your application here? How will this help you?
Kim, do you want to jump in on this, or?
Yeah, sure. As you can see with the budget that's been given there, we don't have an awful lot left over at the end of the day after all of our expenses. I think you can see a surplus of $228. So as dishwashers start to fail and things like that, and increased operating costs, this will make a humongous difference in our ability to service and operate these units effectively.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add that at the current state, we look at fundraising individual items that we will need for the properties. And if you come to the night market, you'll see at the next one, we'll have a little thing about trying to do some yard work and fundraising for that. So having this would make that a lot easier for our organization.
To our treasurer, question in the agenda package on page 44, it refers to property taxes of $4,500. How much of that would be represented in a 100% permissive taxation decision?
So if are you looking at version number 1, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I'm looking at the table on page 44, which is the draft budget for 2022. And maybe it's not an accurate number. Maybe you have the actual taxation.
Okay, let me just double check and get to there.
Or maybe it's in the table you provided us.
Yeah, so the taxation that is basically an exemption for this property at 2022 rates, 100% would be $4,200 and $4,218. And that's the assessment-based taxation for this entire property. And that does not include, as mentioned, the parcel taxes.
Okay, and that's just the town of Gibsons portion.
Oh, the town of Gibsons portion, sorry. Okay, so the town of Gibsons portion, let me just grab that, hang on. So that's all agency taxation. The town of Gibsons portion is, let me just get into my detail. There we go. 14, about just under $1,400. But as mentioned, council exempts, you're exempting for all agencies as well, but the town of Gibson's portion is 1,400. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilors, do you have any questions? Councilor Ludwig?
What criteria have we used for exempting some of the other ones? If I remember correctly, places of worship are statutory exemptions. Is that correct?
Partially.
Partially, okay. So when I look at the list of occupants that we've exempt or proposing to exempt again, what criteria are we using, or do we have a set criteria? Because it's an interesting list.
Yeah. Under the Local Government Act, the footprint of a house of worship is exempted. The land around it is not. That's where the permissive exemption comes in, is on the land around. So a parking lot, for example, that's the permissive exemption portion. So it's not 100%. But the criteria is basically in our in the policy and procedures manual that lays out what kind of procedures or process we go through in considering it.
So what's the history, for example, of the Gibsons Public Market and the art gallery?
Yeah, they were done before me. Public market, I understand, is reflective of our percentage investment in the public market. But was that a timed exemption, Director of Planning? Director of Planning, Director of Finance?
Yes.
Was that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So those two, they had a similar process to this property here. So they are the Gibsons Public Market and the art gallery both were previously taxable, and they came to previous councils requesting an exemption, and councils at the time approved those as well. And again, it was like the mayor had mentioned, it's really reflecting of what is in the policy, and the policy that the town has is quite broad, and it's basically realizing or recognizing that volunteer organizations contribute to the well-being of the community and are an essential component of the fabric. And so that's the overarching sort of view that the policy provides council for looking at tax exemptions. In my report, I had also, although it's not in the policy, and this is something to bring back either this council or future councils, potentially adding some more criteria in the policy to give you a bit more structure, but things like what other types of support is being given, really it's what value do the organizations bring to the community. And previously the Gibsons Public Market, they had, the GPEG, they had part of their property taxed. I think it was the parking lot previously, and that was now, they approached that to get exempted because it's part of their services, similar to the Legion, same process. So it's really similar process to this one, starting out as taxation and then coming to council to, after they've been up and running for a while, to explain the value they provide to the community and looking for a permissive.
Okay, so just before we go off my comment, then if I just wrap up, my point is, I think we all agree that housing is probably the most important and biggest issue in our community. And, we can't deny the value that these folks are providing to our community. And so I really struggle to think that they aren't in need of this exemption when we're also providing it for others. And so whatever we do here today, I'd like us to update this policy to provide more criteria around what we are exempting, so that, because I understand there's a fear that all of a sudden this could have through precedent setting, we might be getting all sorts of applications. But I think we need to really flesh out what we are exempting and provide more detail around that, because I think affordable housing should be probably the #1 thing that we should be thinking about exempting.
Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. And I just wanted to inquire, do you receive any other funding to assist with your operations? And then I've got a second thing that I'd like to.
I can say that the models that we use on the Sunshine Coast here do not receive operational funding from BC Housing. We basically took a mortgage out as a nonprofit organization that we pay with interest and the same standard rates for most mortgages.
Sort of pending further discussion, I would like to move option 3, I believe it is, which is the 100% exemption. You know, as Councillor Ladwig said, you know, we've identified housing as being critical in the community at the moment. And when you look at the services that are being provided by the Affordable Housing Society versus some of the other people that are getting a full exemption, and I know it's difficult because you're not comparing apples to apples, but I would certainly like to move I believe it's option 3. My screen scrolled on me, but that's 100% exemption.
Okay, I have 2 more speakers on the list, but did I take you, and maybe you got, I'm having trouble hearing. I got a fan going in the office beside me. So you are moving motion for
option 3, which was the 100% exemption.
For the recommendation number 1 of the option 1.
Well, I was going by the table 3, which was, and I knocked my mouse and my screen went.
I'm just apologize. I'm having real trouble hearing. If I get closer, I might hear better. But
Mr. Mayor, if I might jump in and help clarify.
please, thank you.
So my understanding is Councillor Kroll, and sorry, I lumped on my recommendations, I lumped versions 2 and 3 together. And so really Councillor Kroll is recommending 100% exemption. So the wording of that would be that rule number 389005 744746 Franklin be granted 100% permissive property tax exemption for the 2023 year, and that bylaw 1273/2019 be amended accordingly and brought back to council in September for approval.
Okay, Councillor Kroll, is that your recommendation? And seconded by Councillor Ladwig. I take it. I have Councillor D'Andrade and Councillor Lumley on the speaker list. Yeah, Councillor D'Andrade.
Thanks, Mayor. At principle, of course, I understand the crisis, the affordable housing crisis. I think my concern is this is a small property, but what happens when Shaw Road is developed, potentially with 70 units? And that's, to me, it's the lack of understanding of the impact, because obviously we have affordable housing crisis, but many residents are also struggling to pay the taxes. They're increasing, you know, very steep slope. So I think, I don't know, I want to support, but I'm just hesitant, because the moment we support that this building will be exempt, to me, is automatically we will assume that Shaw Road will be exempt, and I have no understanding on the impact on the regular resident. So that's that's why I feel uncomfortable at this moment to make a decision. So I understand that $75,000 that we exempt, if I'm reading correctly, and this is 2%. So 2% of taxes of all this volunteer organization is being transferred to residents and business. But I have no idea how much will be the impact of Shaw Road and future affordable housing units. So I don't know if there's a way of the Director of Planning could provide a projection.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's challenging to project out what the value of the Shaw Road one would be, because it's based on assessment. I understand that all 40 units, though, are restricted rental, were projected to be restricted rental. So the affordable housing would apply. There's no sort of market, non-market component as far as I understand it.
There will be the market, non-market component.
Okay. All right. So I can't really project. It's going to be significant, though, because this, of course, is only 3 units. So think about 4. The one thing that I could say is that the permissive tax exemptions, I mean, as mentioned, this is a decision for 2023. And then next council is making a longer term decision for, I would propose 4 more years. So it's not forever. It is challenging though to undo something like this, you know, just because it's difficult once it's started, but it is a decision that councils will revisit.
Go to Councillor Lumley.
I think, first of all, I appreciate Councillor Crowell's like altruistic thoughts and stuff, but and I'm slightly confused about cries for housing when I think 2 of the councillors voted down an entry-level housing project on School Road. But that being said, I think it's precedent setting, and I like, to Councillor Ladwig's point of view and to Councillor DeAndretti's point of view, I think, and plus, even if the next council can change things, like why would this council make decisions just to be reversed by the next council or make work projects for the next council? I think why can't we just make an intelligent decision? Like the Affordable Housing Society was given the land, right? Or the long-term lease for $1 or whatever, and they've got a job to do, and they have to figure out, hey, these are the people that can, this is our affordable portion, here's our market rental portion. Now, if they have to pay tax on the market rental portion, which I think they should, then they might have to charge a little bit more rent, like $1,400 for a 2-bedroom. That would seemingly, to me, fall into affordable. I mean, if you look at the rental rates in Gibsons or Seashell, it's insane. So, I mean, if in fact they had to say, hey, listen, we got to charge $1,650 because we have to pay tax on this portion, I don't think that's unfair. I think you can still leave the affordable housing part with an exemption, but I think personally, I think that because what you're going to do is you're setting yourself up for failure down the road. If people start saying, well, I'm going to build this and I'm going to have these affordable housing, who knows what people are going to think. But if you create the opportunity for someone to go, hey, these 2 units in my project are going to be affordable housing, well, then, you know, I just think we need to make the right decision. I think the right decision would be if it's market rentals, then you pay tax. If it's affordable housing, like under the arm of the Affordable Housing Society, then they get an exemption. I think it's pretty simple, but that's just me. Anyway, my thoughts.
And before I go back to Councillor Ladwig and Councillor Crowell, Chris, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, if you're talking about other residents coming in Gibsons and saying that they have an affordable unit and that they would like the tax exemption, one thing that does make us different is that through our agreements with BC Housing, we have a legal obligation to run those as a nonprofit or another organization, or as a affordable housing, whereas another individual or organization wouldn't have that. So we are obligated to run those as an affordable housing unit, no matter what.
And I think that's great, Chris. And you know what? I've been advocating for developers to lop off part of their projects for affordable housing and give them to you guys under your jurisdiction, and you still get that same exemption. And I totally understand. I just think if anything's at market value, I just think, yeah, it should get tax paid on it. So anyway.
Kim, you had a comment?
Yeah, just 2 comments. So the 2-bedroom at the time that the rents were set, they were market rent. We all know that the Sunshine Coast went crazy with rental shortages, which has driven that up. And of course, we are prevented from putting up the rent so long as the same tenants remain in that unit. So certainly if they move out, which they're not going to because it's pretty sweet rent, we could increase it at the time. The other thing, I just wanted to circle back to another comment about other homeowners that are having hardship making their own tax payments. They actually have the right through the province to apply for deferment. So there is another mechanism for other homeowners.
And before I go back to Councillor Ladwig and Councillor Crowell, I'm just going to express my view as well. I actually agree with Councillor Lumley that the market units should be charged at the as part of coming up to that market rent, as it should be charged at the with the taxation, and the non-market should be tax exempt. That I think could be formulated in a policy. And if we dealt with other homeowners who were prepared to covenant their properties to the town at a non-market rent for a period of 5 to 10 years, I would also consider that being exempting that portion of their property as well, as long as it has come an agreement like you guys have with BC Housing. But somebody can make that agreement with the town, a covenant a unit in their house, and we could say, okay, we can do that. We do that, for example, on the environmental covenant. There are environmental covenants which we then exempt that portion of the property for taxation, so that we could do that. I agree with that concept, because we have to have a model that we can look at and say, okay, for the Shaw Road project, a percentage of that's going to be affordable, a percentage of that's going to be market, and look at it in that context. I would also like to say that it be reviewed, that the tax exemption portion value be identified by the society and put into a contingency for the building, and that money be, so that it's not just take it off and reduce the rent. And it's okay, the rent's already down, take the taxation off, put it into a contingency, and do something yourselves with it. So you actually have that ability to have a breakdown and repair it. So I'll go back to Councillor Ladwig now, and then Councillor Kroll, and then Councillor D'Andrade.
Okay, just a couple quick comments. With regard to Councillor Lumley's comment about the project on School Road, I never saw anything in that application that indicated that those units would be affordable for starters. So I just wanted to clarify that. Everyone's under the idea that they're going to be affordable because they're modular doesn't mean that that's what's going to actually translate. So I just wanted to clarify that. Other comment, and I'm actually seeking some clarity from the Director of Finance. When I read the different versions and options that we have before us, there's a comment made that this would be a 2%, that the town of Gibson's portion equates to 2% of the 2022 municipal property tax levy and so forth. But the 2% right now has nothing to do with the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society, because that's already what's reflective of the 16 projects or 15 projects that are already tax exempt.
That's right.
What this will increase for the town of Gibson's is 0.02% for 75% exemption and 0.03% for 100% exemption. So very little, very little. And at the end of the day, and I totally agree with you, Mayor Beamish, that I think we need to do some work on the policy. If we exempt them 100% today, that's only good until 2023. Gives them a little bit of a buffer so they can start to save that for a broken down dishwasher. And in the meantime, if we start working on the policy, so we come up with parameters around how we manage this so that the town isn't put into a situation, like say when Shaw Road does come on, and maybe we're feeling like 100% of that time will be too much because of the units that we're facing, we can reduce it to 75%. But there's no reason right now that we can't give these guys a little bit of a break for the 2023 year. And in the meantime, work on this policy and ensure that it's something we're all comfortable with going forward.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. The exemption is just for this tax roll. It has nothing to do with Shaw Road. So, you know, that's a whole different ball game. So, you know, I sort of stick where I am. I do agree with you, Mayor Beamish, that it would be a good idea if the what is saved on taxes is put into a contingency fund, because we know appliances today don't last very long. And, you know, a new fridge is, says he who just paid $780 for a new fridge. Yeah. So,
Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I would like if perhaps the Director of Planning can clarify why Kiwanis Village can get the 100% exemption on the building and why the society cannot get since it's provided, or at least partially, when it's providing affordable housing. Why is that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Kiwanis one is very specific. They qualify for a statutory exemption under the community charter, and it's a really it has to do with they were built with a grant and aid between 1947 and April 1st, 1974. It's a really specific criteria, so it's quite unique to that building. It's the only one in the town that has that exemption. And so they are partially statutorily exempt just because of that. And it was because it was reconstructed with the assistance of a grant and aid by the province under this very narrow, I guess about 30-ish years. And it was used exclusively without profit by a corporation to provide homes for elderly citizens together on the land with the building stand. So it's very specific legislation. That's why it gets the statutory exemption.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ludwig?
Sorry, that's a residual hand.
Okay, all right. I'm going to call the question, and I appreciate the debate, and I appreciate the controversy to a degree around this. I'm going to support the resolution because I do feel it's something that the next council should probably look at, and the staff could look at in terms of developing some criteria around the issue of affordable housing. Because I think if we could look at this as an incentive for a homeowner to provide affordable suites, affordable housing as a way, and then provide a tax exemption for a period of time, because they are reviewed every 4 years, and would allow that. And it might increase our opportunity to expand the affordable housing in the community by doing that. So knowing that this is going to be reviewed again next year, that we're only talking in essence 1 year at this point in time, I'm certainly prepared to support it. Even though if we were looking at a long-term solution, I would be applying the 1/3, 2/3 solution on this. But I'm not going to be Solomon today. Councillor Andrade?
Thank you, Mayor. Is it possible to use the funding from affordable housing to pay these taxes? So we are not charging taxpayers?
I don't think that, I mean, I suppose that I'd have to go to our director of finance on that as to whether that's an appropriate use of our funds to pay our own taxes for somebody else.
Yes, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. The generally not the reserve, the affordable housing reserve is used to support affordable housing. It's quite broad, but generally, I would say err on the side of caution and say no. I'd have to dig a bit deeper as to if there's any kind of rule for that. Council could, instead of tying those two together, however, make more, the affordable housing funds are used during the year to support operations that the planning department undertakes. So you could increase the annual amount that goes to the planning department, and that in essence feeds into taxation funding available for other uses. So it's a way to provide additional ease on taxation funding, but not directly to tie it to a property that's getting permissive exempt, because generally those two don't go together. Yeah.
Councillor Andrade again, then Councillor Ludwig.
Mayor, yes. So I know there's a motion on the table, but I like this option. The option that because then we will be using the affordable housing funding for this. And that's why we have the affordable housing funding. And if we can have a mechanism like the director of finance proposed, I'm fully happy to support for the affordable. And perhaps this year we can pay full, but next year, or yeah. So should this motion, does the motion needs to be defeated at this point for me to put this other motion?
That would be appropriate, right? Unless, because amending the motion would be in effect defeating it the way you would be proposing it. So the motion would have to be defeated in order to substitute it. So.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, so I didn't want to make sure I wasn't misunderstood there. So I wasn't suggesting that it would be appropriate to tie these two together at this point. An option that I was suggesting was if council wanted to permissively exempt this property, so add this property to the listing for 2023, as part of the 2023 budget process, the permissive exemptions are reflected in that. And then at that point, you, if necessary, can take any pressure off of taxation funding needed by, if appropriate, providing more affordable housing funding to the planning department for initiatives, but I wouldn't recommend that it be tied specifically to taxation. It's similar to grants of assistance. The policy for that is basically if you're going to provide a grant of assistance, it's not for taxation for a certain property. And I would think the spirit of this this policy would be very similar. Yes, if that makes sense.
And Councillor Ludwig?
Yeah, I apologize. After 4 years of being on council, I should know the protocol and process, but I'm wondering about, not amending, I want to add further that the policy gets reviewed before I'm not sure exactly what the wording should be, but I want to add to this motion. And so I don't know if we need to.
It will get reviewed. It's in the next budget.
Well, no, but not, no, I think that we should look at this policy and develop criteria, more thorough criteria, and how and what we exempt.
Yeah, and perhaps that could be a separate resolution. We'll come back to you on that. Okay.
We'll vote on this
And,
one now.
and Kim and Chris, appreciate the controversy here is not about whether we support affordable housing. It's how much taxation we place on the other homeowners of the town to support affordable housing, because that's where the taxes still have to be collected. And so for all these exemptions we have, we still collect the tax. And we just collect it from the other property owners. And that's always a bit of a tension in a community. So I'm going to call the question, and Councillor Crowell's it was for the 100% exemption for 2023. Are you voting, or you want to say something? Okay, I'm going to cut all in favor of that resolution. Okay. Opposed? Want that recorded, Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, because I just think you're treating every other person that might have a
appreciate that.
Market rental in their property unfairly, because
Yeah.
you're not giving every market rental in town an exemption. So anyway.
Oh, sorry. Can I go back? I forgot about the oh my God, that's confusing. Okay, so we are doing 100% on the
100% was the motion.
Okay. I would like to vote in favor if I can pass another motion.
Well,
How do we do that?
You can now that has been passed, that has been approved for 2023 only,
Okay.
with the understanding that we'll be, Councillor Ladwig, you had another motion.
Oh, and of course I don't have the right wording, but yes, and further that the policy on permissive tax exemption be reviewed to provide further detail in
Criteria.
further detailed criteria in what council exempts, something to that effect.
You want to focus strictly on affordable housing, or do you want to just
Well, I think affordable housing should be the number one thing. Yeah, with okay, sure, with affordable housing being the top priority.
yeah, seconder for that?
Yeah, I'll second.
Councillor Dean Dry, second. Discussion on that? Councillor Kroll?
I'm just wondering what timeline, because we had discussed reviewing this at budget. Because this exemption we're giving is just for 1 year. So I'm just curious, what sort of timeline you're looking at in staff's capacity to deal with it now, between now and then an election?
Okay, so
Well,
before the next tax call. So,
Before the next permission of exemption review, yeah. Because that's that has to be done next year. So. And the other thing about that is that quite possibly the permissive exemption should also look at the strategic plan and see how it jives with the strategic plan and the priorities of council in terms of providing housing options and things like that. So, good choice. Okay, so we're okay for the resolution? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Lumley opposed? Like that recorded? Okay, record that please, yeah. Councillor Dean Dredd?
Yes, Okay, now I would like to make a, oh, it's giving some sound. I would like to make a motion that similar equitable funding be provided to the society, so the taxpayer is not, and funding would be taken from the affordable housing funds in the equivalent to support some operation, and perhaps it goes to the contingency fund. I think. So should I make the motion now, or just some notion of motion, and we deal with this on the next
I
meeting?
think it needs to be a clear motion. I'm not clear as to what you're trying to say. So you can work with staff on that and do a notice of motion on that.
Okay, but perhaps, Mayor, perhaps the director can help us, because my understanding is she mentioned that she doesn't want this transfer attached to the tax exemption, but we can make a motion to provide some funding from the affordable housing to operate, or some operations to the society. Is it correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to
Yes.
get clarification. So my understanding was that, and I've been sort of scanning the Affordable Housing Reserve bylaw, and again, it's quite broad, so there are potentials and mechanism for that. But is council's intention that and it would have to be defined, is this an ongoing, so basically set up an ongoing transfer from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund to the general fund to support affordable housing initiatives, and this would basically compensate for the taxations that have been exempted for this society, as opposed to your wording you were just mentioning seemed to suggest that the payment would go to the society, but you're talking about payment, basically fund coming into the town's budget to help offset the taxation funding that would have been collected in this situation. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I can help with that, and yeah, we can work on something.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. The only thing that I see as a sort of a potential fly in the ointment is that if we are looking at other means of incentivizing rentals and we start eroding the affordable housing fund, paying people's taxes helter-skelter, I think we're potentially going to compromise what's available resource-wise to, for matching funds or giving some lift to a project. Because if suddenly, as was suggested, that people who are providing services and they get a tax reduction, if it's paid out of the same funding, sooner or later, we're going to erode the Affordable Housing Fund at a greater rate than what we're renewing it. So that would be my reservation with Councillor Denvetti's motion. As Councillor Ladwig pointed out, it is a very small percentage. And I think, we need to have a review. When you look at the amounts involved with some of these other exemptions, there are some of them that are, we're definitely stuck with, but there are others that I would seriously question. So I think some of these, we should set a priority that affordable housing for exemptions is what we're going after, and reassess some of the other ones that aren't providing affordable housing.
Councillor Ladwig?
Yeah, I just wanted to back up what Councillor Kroll was saying. As much as I appreciate Councillor DeAndrade's intention with that suggestion, I really feel that the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund should be reserved for capital, not operational. And I would kind of put taxes in the ongoing operational expenses of these facilities. And for the same reasons that Councillor Kroll just described, that would kind of erode and eat away at this kind of capital pot that we can use to initiate new projects. So that's kind of where I would sit on that. But I also just want to make a really quick comment to hopefully give Councillor Lumley some comfort in this, his concern that we're kind of, we're favoring the society and helping them with rentals and not people that have a rental in their own homes. The reason I see this as being different is because someone with a rental in their own home, and I myself have been one of them, you do have an asset that is increasing in value, and that's part of the reason people have a rental property. You're trying to increase your net worth through this investment. These folks, this is a nonprofit society that is not going to benefit from this real property in any way personally, and so I do see it as being a very different thing, and that's why I personally support giving them this exemption.
But part of it's market.
Yeah, I know, but all of it,
that's a silver bullet for these guys, is they get to They get to plan and do their finances. Do you think that affordable housing would be built on Shaw Road without a market side of it? Not in a million years. So it's a way of accommodating affordable housing. I get it, but anyway, I already said my point. But anyway.
Yeah, let's not debate back and forth among each other, please. And Chris and Kim, you've opened up the can of worms for us. We'll try to repackage it. And but at this point in time, council's recommendation to council, the committee's recommendation to council is that the Affordable Housing Society receive that 100% exemption on Franklin Road project. Shaw Road project might be another conversation. Yeah. Okay.
I really want to thank everybody for their real thoughtful comments. We really appreciate the town of Gibson's support for our projects, and we're kind of all in this together. It takes a village,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Or a town, I mean.
Town, takes a town, small
Takes
town.
a town, yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent,
Thank you
thanks so
very
much.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next item on our agenda this afternoon is a report from staff from Kirsten Rockins regarding the Garden Suite Program Review and the 2021 survey results. And Kirsten, before you start your presentation, I just want to thank you for this report. I thought it was very thorough and very interesting. I really appreciate it. And sometimes, we ask for these things and we forget about them, and then they show up on our agenda. And I appreciate all the reasons why it's taken this long. But having it done and having it available to us is important. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm glad you appreciate the reasons for the delay. Can I just confirm that you're looking at the slide with no notes?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Yeah, so this report, which is enclosed in the agenda package, shares the community stakeholder feedback and outcomes of the surveys conducted last year in 2021 as part of the Garden Suites program review. So as you noted, this has been a long time coming. Well, staff and council have pivoted to address shifting priorities through the pandemic and staff shortages of the past many months. And this one in particular is weighed on me, so I'm excited we're able to bring it forward at long last and hopefully move forward in good time with next steps to address the feedback that was generously shared with the community stakeholders. So the purposes of this report are first to share with council the results of the surveys, and second, to obtain council support to prioritize Garden Suites policy updates in next year's budget based on the community feedback. I found that it's important to clarify the definition of garden suites for anyone that might be listening, as the term can have multiple meanings. So unlike a secondary suite, which is contained in the principal residence, garden suite under the Gibsons bylaw definition means a detached dwelling unit that is located on the same lot as the principal building. So some background on the Garden Suites program review. Garden Suites were first introduced in our policy in Gibsons in the 2015 OCP update with the intention to achieve desired infill objectives and accommodate a portion of the town's projected growth within low density residential areas. Based on a range of policy options presented by the project consultant in 2015, a precautionary and rigorous approach to regulation of garden suites was selected by the council of the time, including that form and character for each garden suite application is reviewed and approved by council through a development permit application process, and that garden suites are limited to select garden suites areas with expansion to be considered at a later date. So these garden suites areas were selected based on access to lanes, largely, and further refined based on input from participants of neighborhood consultation meetings. There's not a lot of clarity on how they were defined, to be clear, but it was an evolving map at that time. The map on the right shows the garden suites areas as they are now, including properties on Davis and Poplar Lane, which were added through a zoning amendment in 2019. The rigorous review process was adopted with the intent that the program and policies be reviewed after 10 garden suites were established and or after 5 years of the policy being in place. So in 2020, with 12 garden suites approved, staff brought forward a report to council on the status of the garden suites program and received direction to consult the public on future directions. So 2 stakeholder surveys were developed and conducted through the spring of 2021 to determine program successes and challenges and to inform new Garden Suites policy updates. To evaluate the success of the program, staff looked back on objectives and anticipated benefits of Garden Suites as described at the initiation of the program. These objectives helped to identify potential program stakeholders and inform the design of survey questions. So staff developed 2 surveys to obtain feedback from identified stakeholders in relation to the objectives of the Garden Suites program. The first survey was owners and developers of existing garden suites, so it was directed at, and questions related to uses of the garden suite and property and to the experience and cost of developing a suite. The second survey was open to all residents and addressed the remaining stakeholder groups. Within the online survey, respondents were directed to applicable sections of the survey based on their responses to sorting questions. For example, feedback from respondents identifying as an immediate neighbor or a neighbor within one block of a garden suite are distinguished from those of residents not having a garden suite located in their immediate neighborhood. So residents of garden suites areas were able to provide information about program participation and potential barriers to developing a suite. Neighbor experiences were of particular interest in terms of neighborhood fit and potential impact of garden suites as the program grows. And residents at large, meanwhile, provided feedback on potential expansion of the garden suites areas in their own neighborhoods and their priorities for regulation of garden suite design and siting should the garden suites areas be expanded. Finally, persons in need of housing in Gibsons were identified as a stakeholder group whose interests could not be well captured through the surveys, and therefore the report refers to the 2020 Sunshine Coast Housing Needs Assessment Report as a key resource for evaluating the housing objectives of the program. Copies of the 2 surveys are enclosed with the staff report as attachments C and D. So the first survey was shared by direct mail to property owners or applicants that had developed garden suites since 2015 under the Garden Suites program. This survey was open from February 7th to 18th, 2021, and received an enthusiastic response from participants. I knew it was enthusiastic because we did follow up with phone calls to make sure that we were getting the responses we were looking for. Most were, well, all were happy to share their feedback. So the surveys were completed by owner developers of 14 of the 15 permitted suites in the 2-week period. I think the last was due to selling the property and no longer being in contact. So the second survey, targeting broader community participation, was launched on April 21st of 2021. The survey was advertised in the Coast Reporter, in the town's newsletter, and on social media, and was open for 19 days. Given the importance of feedback from neighbors of Garden Suite specifically, staff also reached out by letter mail to solicit responses from immediate neighbors of Garden Suites. The survey requested respondents to identify their interest in the survey, for example, resident of Gibsons or landowner in Gibsons or other, to specify their neighborhood to ensure feedback represented the identified stakeholder groups and a cross-section of the community. 175 responses were received in the 3-week survey period, representing a broad cross-section of Gibsons neighborhoods. 78 of the 175 respondents identified as neighbors of an existing garden suite. For both surveys, responses were compiled anonymously, though contact information was provided voluntarily by many respondents for follow-up news about the survey and Garden Suites program. So complete survey results as generated by the survey platform are included with this report as attachments A and B, A being the owner survey and B being the broader community survey. I note that this complete statement is in quotation marks, as the online data does allow for refining results based on specific criteria. So as we move into specific policy design informed by the feedback, there's an opportunity to go back in the online data set and further refine to specific questions. So from the survey results, the report identifies some interesting feedback trends identified by staff in terms of informing changes and updates to the Garden Suites regulation. And I'll share a few of those with you right now, only a few. Firstly, motivations for building and uses of the 14 existing garden suites suggest overall alignment with diverse housing objectives of the program, including providing long-term rentals, housing for family members, downsizing in place, and even housing for a disabled family member where they can live independently but with close family support. So despite that short-term rental of garden suites is not currently permitted under the bylaw, 4 of the 15 suites are used as short-term rentals. While this use supports the objective of providing housing affordability for the property owner, no additional housing objectives are met in this scenario, whereas in other scenarios, we see two or more objectives met. A surprisingly decisive result to me was that 80% of survey respondents support expansion of garden suites areas to include their neighborhoods, provided that appropriate design regulation are in place. This result was quite consistent across neighborhoods. 94% of residents favor elimination of the form and character development permit requirement for garden suites. A recommended alternative is including form-based regulations in the zoning bylaw to address feedback and objectives around neighborhood fit. And this would help to streamline the program for staff and for applicants and provide clarity for property or for the community as well, or consistency in the applications, I imagine. The most important policy considerations identified by residents for ensuring good fit in neighborhoods in consideration of expanding the garden suites areas were ensuring that the suite is used for family or long-term rentals only, and secondly, minimizing overlook into neighboring yards. The full list of priorities is in the package. We see in the survey feedback that neighbors' experience of a garden suite varies depending on how close they live to it. And that's not too surprising. As more garden suites are built, more properties will be close neighbors, and therefore it's important to consider the feedback provided by neighbors of the existing suites in choosing our future directions. The most frequent considerations identified by garden suite neighbors for improving neighborhood fit of garden suites are smaller height, better privacy, improved landscaping, and appropriate parking. So anticipating massing and overlook as key concerns around garden suite regulations, staff asked respondents to state their preferred regulation approach with regard to the height and size of garden suites. Based on the policy options of full second story, reduced upper story, or single story as a maximum height for garden suites, and the provided visual examples, only 1/4 of respondents were comfortable with garden suites having a full second story. Most preferred the option of a reduced upper story massing or restriction to a single story height. Recognizing that enclosed parking pushes living space to the upper story, fewer than 1/3 of respondents supported above garage suites or enclosed parking garages within garden suites. The same number are comfortable with small enclosed space for a single vehicle, while 41%, the most respondents, preferred no enclosed parking permitted in suites at all. And this is of significance given that a number of variances that were issued for garden suites were to allow enclosing parking, whereas the floor areas, upper story floor areas in our current regulation aren't practically aligned with providing parking on the lower floor. So this was just a glimpse of the information shared by the public in the surveys, but you can find more looking at the feedback attached to the report. From the survey feedback, staff have outlined some key policy directions that may be pursued in a policy update to strengthen and streamline the program going forward. These include expanding the garden suites areas as outlined in the discussion section of the report, replacing the form and character development or DP requirements for garden suites with regulations in zoning bylaw 1065, refining regulations to improve neighborhood fit as prioritized in the survey feedback, reviewing development and utility fees to improve and balance incentives for infill development, addressing infrastructure implications of garden suite development on lanes, for example, garbage collection, stormwater management, utility connections, such as overhead wiring or not, mapping locations for on-street parking. So I won't go into analysis of the survey limitations here, but these are in the report on pages 6 and 7. Also the relationship of outcomes and recommended directions to other town policies and the strategic plan are covered on pages 9 through 13. We have options in terms of next steps for the Garden Suites policy update stemming from this feedback. Ideally, with the appropriate funding, we can proceed with consultant support in 2013 to drafting a comprehensive Garden Suite policy update. Secondly, this may also happen in the meantime or in addition. Staff may proceed with phased updates to Garden Suite policy as time and staffing allow, in accordance with the feedback presented in the report. So and these processes would both involve public consultation as they are updates to the OCP and or zoning bylaw. With the appropriate budget, staff anticipate that policy updates could largely be completed in the third or fourth quarter of 2023, barring any new pandemics or other surprises. Staff's recommendations are on page 1 of the report and include that the report, including the 2021 Garden Suites program survey results, be received for information, and that the Garden Suites policy updates reflecting the community feedback be prioritized in budget considerations for 2023. Alternatively, staff may change or choose not to recommend a budget timeline for updates to the Garden Suites policy. And in this case, the staff report on survey results would be accepted for information only. So thank you for your time. I'll turn the floor over to council for discussion.
Kirsten, thank you very much. And I guess my question is there, given that we are looking at making policy review and updating, and with the anticipation that a report perhaps forthcoming this time next year, perhaps, or a little later, is there any urgency? Did you see anything out there that was screaming at you that said we had to do something now? Or can we just take this logical process to get it done?
That's a very good question. The biggest pressure that staff note is that we do get frequent, we have a host of property owners that inquire regularly about the possibility of having a garden suite. Some of these are on lanes where garden suites are permitted on one side of the lane and not on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so there's a seen imbalance or injustice, and they would like to see a change. We have let them know that they could pursue a zoning amendment independently, but ideally we would look at criteria for consistent criteria for expanding the garden suites areas. So expansion of the garden suites areas is key. The other piece of that, though, is if we expand the garden suites areas, it might be well advised to ensure that the updates to the policy are made both to make it less burdensome on staff and council to process, but most importantly, to make sure the fit is right in new areas.
Thank you. I'll go to council list right now. Councilor Lumley, Councilor Ladwick, Councilor Dean Dratt. So let's start with Councilor Lumley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions for Katie. I noticed in one of the graphs, there's a large contingent of garden suite owners that don't figure that the town should be involved in the design or the look of it. And it's been a while since, or at least I can remember, my memory's terrible, but getting an application or seeing a garden suite application, is that part of the process? Is the form and character part of that process for council?
Yeah, great question. Garden suites are part of the development permit area number 8. So they do go through a form and character application process, and we review the form and character. It is the only type of development in a single family situation where there's a development permit review.
Okay, awesome. And then the other one was, I know you said with appropriate funding and stuff, does the province, we've all seen this town, the staff on this town are very diligent in grant funding and applying for grants. Does the government have funding, like housing funding, that you could maybe tap into for this type of project, like to density, long-term rentals, stuff like that you could maybe get?
Yeah, good question. We can look into it for sure. I haven't looked into that. Maybe the director of finance might have some ideas, but we would certainly, when funding opportunities come up, it's definitely on the radar to catch anything that would help.
Thanks.
Director of Planning?
I don't have anything to add. It was just that we are always looking out for funding opportunities to fulfill our priorities, our council's priorities. So when we do see something, we will bring a report forward or ask council for permission to apply for it. But we haven't seen anything for garden suites, unfortunately.
Thank you. Councilor Ludwig?
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment Kirsten on her work on this file. I thought the survey was great. The report was really good. It was very thorough. I think it's just an awesome piece of work. I totally support it.
Thank you.
Councilor Dean Dredd?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Your report was really good, detailed. I think the survey was also great. Surveys are not easily done, was also well delivered. So congratulations. I agree mostly. I see two things that I'm concerned with: the replace form and character development permit requirements with garden suites regulation in the zoning. I don't know, when we get, I appreciate bringing to council. I understand that, staff has more work, but at the same time, it's a garden suite can be quite invasive, right? It could be on a lane, and I'm not sure if the regulations would cover everything, so I'll be a little hesitant not to come to council. Plus, according to the report, 36% of suites require variance, so 40% basically still have to come to council. So I still would like, perhaps when we go another round of really sorting out all the details of what the public wants or doesn't want. I think right now I feel hesitant. And then the second thing, it regards parking. I feel that council is, well, and given what climate change and the whole housing crisis, we are in this balance of having to provide parking and perhaps not, because we will evolve. I know bigger cities with better transit, they don't need the same parking requirements. So I feel that parking in general in Gibson has to be studied, because every development we have, we go through this. Well, our requirements for parking are beyond what other cities do. And then the town has certain areas that I see in particular, but I'm not expert, that require more parking, and others maybe not too much. So I just want to put the seed that I think probably the next council should have a parking, a comprehensive understanding what we're going to do to solve the other side of the equation, right? Providing perhaps more affordable housing with less parking, as long as it doesn't impact the citizens. So right now, I understand that the legislation will continue requiring parking on site to avoid, and perhaps even in this parking discussion, we know that narrow streets, we control speed. So it could be also a way of controlling speed. I understand that once people don't have parking in the streets, they feel the impact when they see too much parking. But anyways, I can feel that more and more the development proposals, we always have the parking issue. So I would like this to be discussed as well, hopefully next year, next council meeting. But overall, really good job. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Kroll?
Thank you, Mayor Beamish, and thank you, Kirsten. It's a great report, and and what I particularly like is the way that you collected the information. You can reevaluate it and reassess it, so it provides extra options. Obviously, the garden suite issue goes hand in glove with the OCP, and as we're all aware, the OCP is just constantly biting us in the backside. That it's we're getting into these bizarre spot zoning situations. So I think, it's a wonderful opportunity to use this incredibly valuable information that you've collected and incorporated into, a revised OCP that hopefully will make less work for staff in the long run. I know it's going to be a painful process to get there, but certainly I think there's a unique opportunity to, have a look at some of the areas where we might consider expanding garden suites. And, if they can tick the boxes and incorporate them into the OCP so we can, make your work easier or life a little better for you. Anyway, thank you so much. Great report and really appreciate it.
Thank you, Council. There are some recommendations on page 69, or a recommendation on page 69, and somebody care to move that recommendation? Councilor Crowell, thank you. Seconded by Councilor Ludwig. Thank you very much. All in favor? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. And Kirsten, I again, in terms of the compliments on the report, I also complimented you on your stick-to-itiveness of actually going out and soliciting responses to survey. I mean, that's something we often don't get a chance to do. We know there's more information out there. We know we've missed people. We know they haven't spoken up. Go knock on the door, phone them, write them another letter. That's a really strong approach. I really appreciate that. So thank you. And okay, we'll let you off the hook now. You can go home and have supper. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next report is the amendment to zoning bylaw to rezone 504 South Fletcher Street to multifamily residential 6 RM6 to enable future multifamily development on the site. Kirsten Defoe.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome, Kirsten.
I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So as just mentioned, the application to be discussed today is for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property at 504 South Fletcher Road to allow future redevelopment in accordance with the official community plan. The purpose of the report in this presentation is to obtain recommendations from committee to council, as well as directions on next steps for the requested zoning amendment. So the subject property outlined here in blue, close to where Town Hall is located. It's located between on South Fletcher Road, between South Fletcher Road and Periwinkle Lane. And it is one of 8 properties, which is located on the south side of South Fletcher Road between School Road and the Holland Lands. Property is currently developed with a single family home. It's surrounded by a low density neighborhood, community uses on the Holland Lands, and as well as the mixed commercial uses on Gower Point Road. The land use designation of the property under the OCP is medium density residential, which you can see here is a designation shared with the 7 other properties on the south side of South Fletcher Road, again between School Road and the Holland Lands. The site is also within the Harbor Area Plan and Development Permit Area 5 for forming character in Lower Gibsons. No change in the OCP designation or related forming character guidelines are considered necessary to support the requested rezoning. The property's current single-family residential 2 zone is shared with the surrounding single-family developed properties. One nearby property at 524 South Fletcher is currently zoned RM6, which is the requested zoning for this rezoning. And it is actually the only property in town which is subject to that zoning. So the subject property is close to the only other one that is zoned. In the zoning bylaw, the site is also subject to sub area I of the town's view protection areas. And that is not proposed to be changing. Future development would need to satisfy these requirements in terms of the form, size, bulk, and massing of the newly proposed building. So staff consider that the requested RM6 zone represents an appropriate rezoning of the site to meet the intentions of the OCP for the property. Furthermore, the property is one of the 8, again, on the southeast side of South Fletcher Road between School Road and the Holland Lands. And those properties as highlighted are specifically referenced in the intent of the zone. Then I would also note that the maximum residential density based on the lot size in the RM6 zone would be 6 apartment units, and those could be condos or rental apartments. So the applicant has not provided future designs for future redevelopment on the site with this rezoning. So that does mean that future development would need to satisfy the zoning bylaw for the new zone and other relevant requirements, view protection, parking, other general requirements, those sorts of requirements. It would also require a development permit issuance for both form and character assessment, as well as aquifer protection purposes. To give a little bit more information about view protection sub-area I, the rezoning would allow for multifamily development of the site, but no changes, again, to this existing view protection sub-area are proposed as part of the amendment bylaw. So items 1 through 4 of section 5.13 would apply both to a single family dwelling if the property were to be redeveloped without a rezoning, or if the rezoning were adopted to a future multifamily development. It is unique in terms of item 1. I don't believe any of our other view protection sub areas quantify maximum height in quite the same manner. Essentially what this means is if you look at the front elevation of a proposed dwelling, proposed structure, and bring all surfaces that you can see to a projected front, at least 40% of that structure would not be allowed to exceed 3.6 meters from the average height of the sidewalk. Well, 60% could go up to 6 meters from that height. So whether that would be to provide for a traditional sort of gable and roof form, or a more square modern form, like is the design that was is under construction at 524, this would have to be met with any new design. So moving on from the proposed zone, the applicants have provided a community amenity offer letter that is in accordance with the standard approach for CACs under policy 3.14. This is for a $15,000 monetary contribution. This follows the formula of 5,000 per potential maximum units, minus a $10,000 credit for the existing single family home. Referral comments were received from all referral agencies, and no concerns or objectives to the rezoning were raised. So lastly, the staff report has a number of recommendations. So staff recommend that the zoning amendment be forwarded to council for first and second readings, that a virtual public hearing be scheduled to begin at 5:30 p.m. on September 6th, 2022. And furthermore, that council accept the community amenity contribution offer letter. So I will now return the floor to the committee for consideration. I will mention that the applicant is not present in the meeting today.
Thank you, Kristen. Trying to think as I look at this application, how it is different from the one we are considering on School Road, which also offers a community amenity based upon the same formula. Yet, and that one we're seeing actually plans and parking challenges and things of that nature that we're saying here they'll be dealt with through process. And it almost seems premature to me to be taking a community amenity operation offer without actually seeing what they're building and understanding what they're building. But how's that process different?
It could be considered different in a few ways. The main way is that the RM6 zone that's being proposed for this rezoning is very specific in its intent to basically apply to 8 properties, this being one of them. Whereas a medium density rezoning on School Road sort of is not as specifically referenced in any of the zones. Important to note that the CAC policy allows for the collection of community amenity contributions at the time of rezoning prior to adoption of a rezoning, but it wouldn't at a later date for DP or for building permit or the such.
Right. Interesting. Director of Planning.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that the 757 school road report came to council, I don't even remember, 2020 maybe.
Yeah,
and council at that point asked for more details and asked for them to apply for a development permit, which is why they applied for a development permit. But typically, it's not required at the rezoning stage. Rezoning is very much a land use decision stage, and once the land use is in place, then a form and character would be looked at. So there's a bit of a difference in the process with this one as well.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Diendrad, Councillor Landwig, then Councillor Lumley.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I had the same surprise in a way. So just confirming, form and character will still come to council, right?
Correct, that would still be required.
Okay. Then I have just one concern. Is this zoning just attached to this particular project? Because I wonder, anyone can ask to zone the property and then sell the property at much higher rates, right? I mean, given the lift value. Is it possible?
Yes.
Yes.
It is. They could upzone a property, then sell it on. Yes.
Okay, so that's a little bit challenging for me, but so the next, my other question is, I have the regulation for sub-area sub-area I, and I read this so many times, and I cannot comprehend the bullet one, the first bullet. I kind of understand, but I cannot visualize because it goes back to the building phase. Can you, if I'm looking at the property, because the picture here, it's as a side. On the side. But if I'm looking front, what does it really mean?
So if you consider it, as I was trying to allude to, as a traditional gable end roof, which obviously we don't know if that's going to be a design that's proposed, but the outer edges of that gable end roof, up to a point like 20% of the front of the building either side, could go up to that lower level, as long as the part that continues going up to meet the peak of the roof was still under 6 meters.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ledwig.
Yeah, I personally love this process. I wish we could do all our development projects this way, like break it out, make it clear, make it simple. I mean, we're just talking about zoning right now. Like you said, we'll look at form and character later. I think this is a very clear, easy to understand way of going about bringing our OCP into fruition, which is what we've written it for. So I love it. I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, my question is, I don't know if it's a tax reason, but why not just rezone the entire street multifamily? Like, why go one house at a time? Like, why not just go, all the lots are like generally the same size, they're on the same street, they're between the same two streets. Why not just rezone the whole street? And then you don't have to keep coming back every lot. My only question was like, if you rezone it, are you paying taxes based on the potential development on that site? Because I know that that's in some communities in Vancouver and stuff. Like, so if you have a single family home and you have a zoning for a multiplex, would you have to pay zoning as if it was there, or pay taxes, or does that not exist? Like, and then that's the only thing I could think of why you wouldn't just rezone everybody's property there.
Okay, that's certainly, thank you for that question. That there's two sort of separate portions, I think, of what you were just saying. In terms of the taxes, I would suspect that, of course, those would be based on evaluation of the property. And I'm certainly not a financial expert, But the assumption would be that a higher property value would be attached to something that had a higher redevelopment potential. However, another potential drawback of that approach would be causing the existing single-family homes and the people who own those homes. It would make it a little bit more difficult for them to do changes or additions, that sort of thing, to their home if they didn't want to rezone or redevelop as multifamily at this time. So that should be another consideration. Although rezoning the whole street certainly could be something council could investigate.
Question to Director of Planning: if we rezone the whole street as a council initiative, would we be entitled to a community amenity from each property?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and we could build it into the zone with a density bonus. So we could do a base density, and then any added density would come with a CAC contribution. So we could build that right in. Because somebody has applied for this application and has paid for it, I would recommend proceeding with this application as a one-off and then doing some broader community consultation on the rest of the properties. But I do think it would be a great idea to pre-zone those sites and bring it into conformance with the OCP.
I'm reminded of Davis Road.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Diandrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I think my concern is, I think we will lose the capability of requesting the CACs. I think that's the issue for me, and we need this funding. I understand that if you rezone, we can set up, but I think if we do individually, each person would build, maybe one person will build only 3. And how do we decide these people are going to build 5 units? I don't know. I think my only concern is losing the power that rezoning gives to council to support basically amenities and affordable housing.
Yeah, I have to admit I had the same thought as Councilor Lumley. To me, those few properties that are there, that seems to be the direction that block is going in. But I guess we let them do it in their own time if we choose that. So. Director of Planning again.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I was clear, but you can build the CAC into the zone through a bonus density. So you can require, so you could set a base density of, an example would be 1 unit, so a single family, and then a maximum density of up to 5 units. And for each added unit, they would have to pay a contribution to in accordance with our CAC policy. So then we would still collect CACs with the added density.
Okay.
Councilor Ludwig?
Yeah, I support all of this. I think that's a great idea too. If you could do it for the whole strip, do it. But I agree that with the Director of Planning that we should move forward with this particular application because they've applied and they probably don't want to get bogged down in process. But I think it's all good.
Councilor Crowell.
I'm prepared to move the recommendations outlined in 3.5.
So you're moving the recommendations?
As presented, and Councillor Lumley is seconding.
Okay. So I'm going to go clear again, Councillor Crowell, because I do have trouble hearing you. So you're moving the recommendations as presented.
Correct, sir.
And that includes accepting the community amenity offer?
It would be nice if there was room to negotiate that up, but you know, I don't know if there is any opportunity when they present a proposal that might, you know, because right now the CAC is associated with the zoning, it's not associated with a project. So I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity for any other amenities that might come our way when a project is presented?
Through the mayor, no. So CACs are negotiated at time of rezoning, and we assess the offer with the council policy that was passed. So if anything, the next step, if you're feeling like this isn't enough of an offer, then the appropriate step would be to review that policy and make it stronger.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Diandrade.
No, it's a question.
Yeah, no, it has been moved and seconded. So
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, so now I'm looking at the harbor area plan, and there's a policy 5.12 that talks about, in order to maintain a village scale and character in Gibson's Harbor, building height should be limited to 1 or 2 story on the higher side of the lot and 3 to 4 stories as seen from the lower side. How this, is this something that automatically, I know we are not dealing with form and character, but is it something that this policy would, by the time the owner would design, is this like how this policy will take place? What's the process for them to acknowledge that this is the harbor area policy?
Great. That's a great question. I'm looking at the two numbers in sub area I for those two different heights, 3.6 to 6 meters. That's basically in line with a single story building with a gabled roof.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll now go to inquiries. I don't know if there's anybody still there. We have Kathy and Gibsons and the Coast Reporter. Any questions from Kathy or the Coast Reporter? Kathy and Gibsons. Kathy, you had your hand up shortly. Now you're gone. That means you're with us. There you are. Yeah. Kathy, you're still muted on my screen.
Here we go. Found the unmute key. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say, I mean, I participated in that garden suite survey, and I just wanted to clarify a bit what I think, because I heard a lot about increased density here again. And I'm trying to say, it makes my palms sweat a bit. I have to tell you that, because I live in Lower Gibsons, and I feel like I'm someone who sat down to a meal and the town comes to the door and they say, listen, there are people who don't have enough to eat. And I think, oh, that's terrible. Okay, I guess some of my meal I can give up. And I'm okay with that. And then I feel later the town comes to the door and they tell me, we've got these people that are having an enormous feast and they can't seem to ever get enough food. So now we want you to give them a bit more. And I think, wait a minute, this is the enjoyment of my home. This is my neighborhood. And it's not providing housing for the people I feel that need it, that want to be my neighbors. It's third or fourth houses for people who will never have enough, for a market that will never be filled. And that is very disturbing to me. And I just want to sort of give you that feedback that, and I think I read it when I carefully read the responses to the survey on the garden suites. I saw that too. There were people that seemed to be trying to express the same thing and all that. You know, it's one thing if we're contributing to the, you know, allowing more people to live and work in Gibsons. You know, we can't get enough police because they can't live here. It's one thing to do that, but it's another thing that you ask me to give up the quality of my life for millionaires to have their third home. And I don't know how you can solve that, but that's a huge issue for me and my neighbors. But thank you for the chance to listen to you. I love these Zoom meetings.
Well, thank you very much for participating, Kathy, and for your comments. The garden suite thing will come back again, and further opportunity to comment with council. Thank you. Okay, council, we are going to meet again at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, so that I'd like to ask for adjournment motion. Councilor Ladwig, Councilor Kroll, all in favor of adjournment? Thank you, and we'll see you back. We'll see you in council chambers at 6 o'clock. And welcome back, Councilor Ladwig. And could you do all your reading for tonight?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilor Deidre, sorry.
Mayor, it's going to be at the council chambers.
And Council Chambers.
Oh, I
Yes,
wasn't aware.
But it's 7.
7 o'clock. Yeah,
Okay,
7.
Seven.
Okay.